When I pushed open the door to the private room, Brandon was locked in an intense kiss with a girl. His buddies panicked. "It's just a game. He lost, that's all." Brandon panicked too. He grabbed my wrist. "I'm sorry." "What are you apologizing for?" "It's not like we're together," I said with a nonchalant smile. "Besides, Brandon, I've told you before, you'll never change." Brandon, the infamous playboy on campus, was caught with a phone full of photos of one particular girl. When people compared the photos to his exes, they noticed something peculiar: all of them bore a slight resemblance to that girl. This caused a sensation across campus, and my social media exploded with mentions. Because that girl was me. Since enrolling, I'd earned perfect scores in every subject, won scholarships year after year, and often represented the school in competitions, bringing home gold. Wait, are you saying the one he's been into this whole time is Olivia, the unattainable flower? Well, no wonder. Olivia's so gorgeous and accomplished. Why would she ever go for someone like him? Hey, let's not forget, Brandon's dated plenty of unattainable girls before. At the time, I was already stressed about a tutoring job and replied impatiently to my roommate's phone call. Why should I care? Do you really think he could ever stay consistent with me? Unfortunately, another roommate had her video chat on, and her boyfriend happened to be in the same dorm as Brandon. Naturally, this got back to him. The next day, when I went to interview for a tutoring position, I found myself face to face with Brandon. He awkwardly rubbed his nose and said, "Guess I'll prove how consistent I can be." The tutoring job? It was for Brandon's younger brother, who was still in middle school. "Olivia, is it true someone's seen you getting out of Brandon's car recently?" The message arrived as I was, indeed, in Brandon's car. He was steering the wheel, a smirk playing on his lips. "What do you want to eat?" "Anything's fine." After my parents divorced, I refused to live with either of them. To ease my grandma's financial burden, I started doing odd jobs in high school. In college, I earned scholarships annually and took on tutoring gigs whenever I could. Dating, frankly, wasn't on my radar. I'd heard rumors about Brandon liking me before, but I never paid them any mind. Though, to be fair, his family did pay well for tutoring. "I swear, I didn't know you'd be tutoring my brother," Brandon said, his eyes sparkling. "My mom found you." "Total coincidence." "Got it." I put down my phone, choosing not to reply. By the second month of tutoring, his pursuit of me was undeniable. At first, I resisted. But since his house was so far from where I lived, I eventually gave in to his offers of a ride, and later, dinner. Brandon was surprisingly attentive. In an attempt to deter him, I took him to a few roadside food stalls. To my surprise, he didn't complain. In fact, he carefully wiped down the utensils for me. I never pried into his past, but I knew he dated countless girls who all vaguely resembled me. Yet during the time we spent together, I never once saw him with another girl. Apparently, everything I said, he took seriously. One day, he brought me to a gathering with his friends. "This is Olivia," he said as he opened the door for me. "Listen up, no smoking, and cut out the crude jokes." His friends stared at me in surprise. A fleeting thought crossed my mind: was he using this to show off? But as if reading my mind, Brandon leaned in and whispered, "These are my closest friends. They're trustworthy. No gossip. Before you agree to date me, I'll make sure you're completely willing." Brandon laughed, his fox-like eyes curving mischievously into crescent moons. I felt a flicker of something and turned away, brushing the hair behind my ear. When my fingers brushed against my earlobe, it was burning hot. They decided to continue the night at another spot. When Brandon asked if I was okay with it, I inexplicably nodded. As the night went on, they started drinking games. I sipped on a cocktail, bored by the usual antics. One of Brandon's friends leaned over. He said he's not playing anything too wild tonight. At first, I didn't get it. Then I saw the bottle spin and land on Brandon. His dare? To get nose to nose with a girl for 10 seconds. Without hesitation, he picked up his drink and downed 3 glasses in a row. Everyone else had brought their girlfriends, but there were also a few single, attractive girls eyeing him. Brandon, wearing a black t-shirt, pushed the sleeves up to his shoulders, revealing his toned arms. His cheeks were flushed, his sharp features softened slightly by the alcohol. "I said I wasn't playing," Brandon drawled, slamming down the empty glass. "And I meant it." "Not playing? We're just waiting for the right person to play with? Someone jeered, and suddenly, our eyes met. I looked away first. After leaving the bathroom, I found Brandon leaning against the wall, looking lost in thought. I stepped outside to use a different restroom, needing some air. Brandon followed me. Too many people in there, he explained when I glanced at him. I didn't want any drunkards bothering you. Even cocktails have their limits. And I felt like I'd hit mine. A little unsteady, I found myself leaning against the wall, caging him in. Olivia. Brandon was taller than me. I tilted my head up to look at him, feeling a little dazed. What was the dare you got earlier? I asked, leaning closer until our noses were almost touching. Nose to nose. 10 seconds, he murmured, moving closer still. 1 more inch, and our lips would touch. I saw his Adam's apple bob. Are you about to confess your feelings? Fueled by liquid courage, I blurted the question out. 3 seconds later, Brandon burst into laughter, his breath warm against my skin. Not a chance. Let's make a bet. I'll see if I can get you to admit you like me first. It was midsummer at the time, and Brandon invited me to the beach. His family had a villa there. Of course, I wasn't the only one invited, a whole group of his friends came along, and most of them brought their girlfriends. There were also a few other girls in the mix. I hadn't expected so many people, so I felt a bit reserved. But Brandon immediately arranged the largest room for me, right next to his. Even though I wasn't a fan of socializing, I found myself adapting once I was there. A few girls ended up in my room, sticking around to chat with me. 2 of them seemed especially interested in Brandon. Are you close with Brandon? Do you know what he likes? Yeah, I've heard he changes girlfriends often. I'm thinking of giving it a shot. Do you know what kind of girls he's into lately? My hands froze slightly on the keyboard. I'm not sure. Figures, one of the girls, Lisa, nodded. You're still working even when you're out having fun. You probably don't pay attention to that stuff. How long have you known Brandon? Not very long. Seeing that I was busy with my freelance work on the laptop, they sensibly stopped asking questions. But as I stared at the screen, I grew increasingly irritated. Finally, I shut the laptop and grabbed a glass of lemon water to cool off on the balcony. The night breeze carried the salty scent of the sea as it brushed against my face. Lost in thought, I suddenly heard someone knocking on the glass. I turned my head and nearly jumped in fright. Don't scream, Brandon whispered as he climbed over from the balcony. They're still inside, right? Our rooms were on the 2nd floor, and the balconies were close enough to each other, separated only by a modest gap. He had just climbed over that gap. Are you crazy? I hissed. Shoo. He grabbed my hand and led me into the shadows of a corner. Keep your voice down. The laughter of the girls on the other side of the door was especially clear. The shadowed area was narrow. Brandon was leaning against the railing with his back to it, while I supported myself, and there was barely a fist's distance between us. It felt a little awkward. Look, he seemed unaware of the discomfort, smiling as he pulled something out of his pocket. Here, take it. It was a small, hand-woven rabbit keychain. If you like it, just say so, Brandon smiled again, ruffling my hair casually. You were staring at it for so long, why didn't you just ask to buy it? When we first arrived here in the afternoon, we all went around the market together, and I instantly spotted this rabbit keychain. But I was with those girls, and if I stopped, they would stop too. If I bought it, they would pick out other little rabbits from the stall as well. But I don't like sharing things with others. Even something similar wouldn't do. So, I just stared at it for a while and then turned away. I didn't realize Brandon had noticed. Alright, take it and keep it safe. He shoved the keychain into my hand. I came over secretly. If I came openly, they'd tease us, and that would bother you. Had to climb up the balcony. I opened my mouth, but in the end, I only said, don't climb next time, it's dangerous. I won't climb next time, Brandon suddenly leaned in and brushed my nose with his fingers. Unless you leave the door open for me. I was momentarily stunned and took a few steps back. Why the big reaction? He pursed his lips. Alright, even though climbing up to the balcony is romantic, like Romeo and Juliet, I won't do it next time, just for you. I was about to say something when Brandon was already back on the balcony in just a few moves. Okay, he turned back with a smile, Take care of my little rabbit. Good night. Good night. Back in the room, I held back my emotions and sat back down on the couch. I hid the keychain behind me. One of the girls saw me return and casually asked, "Why were you out there for so long? Did we disturb you?" No, I replied quickly. She didn't ask more and turned back to chat with the others. But in that moment, I felt like I was keeping a secret, something hidden deep inside, and it only had to do with Brandon. Because my family was poor, I had no choice but to earn every scholarship available and work part-time as a tutor during my free time to cover my tuition and living expenses. Mrs. Liu seemed to like me a lot and paid generously, so in a way, I was grateful to Brandon for that. After my mother passed away, my father remarried, but he was often away for work, leaving just me and my stepmother at home. My stepmother had a son named Claude, who was 5 years older than me. To save on rent, I lived with him throughout high school. After I turned 18, my stepmother stopped giving me any financial support, claiming I was now capable of fending for myself. I calculated the money she had spent on me over the years and planned to pay her back, but instead, she asked me to take care of Claude. Claude had just graduated from college this year and was preparing to start his own business. As for how I felt about him, truthfully, not much. He was tall and attractive enough, but always wore a cold expression, making him seem distant and unapproachable. In my memory, we rarely interacted. If it hadn't been for his drunken confession last time, I probably wouldn't have even thought about him. "You know your brother is starting a business now, right? Be a dear and cook him a few meals. He took care of you plenty before, after all." Got it. I planned the timing carefully so I could finish cooking before Claude got home. But unexpectedly, he came back early that day. When he pushed open the door, I was in the middle of stir-frying. The next second, a slender hand reached out and took the spatula from mine. "Get out, I'll handle this myself." I looked up and met his clear gaze. Without a word, I removed my apron and left the kitchen. Claude wasn't the type to drink and forget everything afterward. That confession, he'd owned up to it, and I had rejected him outright. After finishing cooking and turning off the stove, Claude brought a plate to the table. "Come eat." "No, I still have class." "Then wait a minute first." He blocked my way. I took half a step back. "What is it?" Standing in front of me, his shadow partially covered me. "What's going on between you and Brandon?" "Oh, I'd nearly forgotten, Claude graduated from the same university." I tilted my head. "Nothing much. Going everywhere together, laughing and chatting. Don't cause any trouble for us. Our family can't afford to lose face." I frowned. Before I could react, he pushed me down onto the couch, leaving me stunned. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," Claude said calmly, leaning in to meet my eyes. "But do you know what kind of person Brandon is?" I turned my head away, momentarily at a loss for words. "See," he chuckled softly. "Even my dear sister can be foolish sometimes." "I don't know." "Do you?" "I might not, but his countless ex-girlfriends surely do." His words left me speechless. After a moment of silence, Claude spoke again. "Olivia, do you like him?" I didn't know. I only knew that being around Brandon made me feel something I hadn't in a long time, a spark of youthful longing. "Maybe, just a little." "I won't hold it against you for rejecting me," he said slowly. "But how about a bet?" I looked into his eyes. "What kind of bet?" "Let's see if Brandon will stay consistent with you if you keep your distance." Claude chuckled again. After a pause, I asked, "How long?" 4 months. Give yourself a deadline. 4 months to see if he can stay loyal to you. And let me observe how long my proud little sister, under my mother's control, can keep up her pride. Ah, yes. I knew it. My stepmother wanted me to end up with Claude. It would save the wedding expenses and keep me firmly under her thumb. Claude was implying that if I lost the bet, I'd have to compromise. But I was Olivia, I would never bet my life on a man. "Let's stop here for now. Take a nap and rest up, we'll continue this afternoon." Closing the book, I turned to see Brandon leaning against the doorway. I didn't know how long he had been watching. Dan, his younger brother, had dashed downstairs the moment class ended. I got up and began tidying my things in preparation for the next session. "Let him rest, don't you think you should take a break too?" Brandon walked over, leaning against the table with a faint smile as he watched me. Olivia, you're such a dedicated teacher. We all see it. Not slacking at all. I glanced at him, my mind drifting back to the bet with Claude from 2 days ago. Brandon's alluring, almond-shaped eyes always carried a hint of tenderness, no matter who he looked at. Why aren't you saying anything? He leaned in suddenly, his eyes closer to mine. Speechless? I took half a step back. Just a bit distracted. Even with me in front of you, you can space out? He chuckled. What a waste of charm. I turned away. Weren't you out with them? Why are you back already? It's no fun without you. Brandon was always so straightforward. I'd been feeling a bit tired lately. I didn't want to go. Then I'll keep you company. At lunchtime, I often ate at Brandon's house. He brewed tea, his movements graceful and practiced, and handed me a cup. Try it. I took a sip. It was excellent. But his next words made me choke. This tea has been passed down in my family. And? Only wives get to drink it. He looked up, a teasing smile in his eyes. Drink it, and you're my wife. I coughed violently, my face turning crimson. Brandon burst out laughing. Just kidding. Look how scared you are. His brother Dan called for him from upstairs, likely struggling with his new projector. Wait here for a bit. Left alone in the garden, I pulled out my phone out of boredom. At the top of my notifications was a message from my roommate. Olivia, I heard Brandon made a bet to pursue you for just 1 month. Though it's just a rumor, you know how much of a player he's been. Be careful. I stared at the messages until the screen went dark. I'm back. Brandon soon returned. Looking at his handsome, smiling face, I felt a moment of disorientation. Did he have the same expression when talking about that bet? My phone suddenly rang, it was Claude. I stood up immediately. Sorry, I have something to take care of. I'll come back in the afternoon for class. What's going on? Brandon paused, clearly noticing the name on the screen. You're leaving without even answering the call? Must be urgent. I'd already made plans, I just forgot. What could be so urgent that you can't even spare 3 hours at lunch? He kept asking, and I didn't know how to respond. I couldn't exactly tell him I needed to deliver food to Claude. That's a secret. I packed up my things. Just a friend. Oh, a male friend. Brandon's gaze was direct, his hostility obvious. I've never heard of any other male friends in your life besides me. It sounded like something a rightful lover might say. Self-assured. But I couldn't bring myself to be angry. I started to wonder how many women he had been with to develop this kind of effortless charm. 3 days had already passed in the 4-month trial. The test had begun. You can't possibly know everything, I said lightly. Brandon, you're not that important to me. In the early days of his startup, Claude was always running around nonstop. I had seen him get so drunk a few times over a project, holding the toilet while throwing up, and over time, it became natural for me to cook for him. I guess you could say we were like family. He wasn't exactly bad to me either. Claude's company was small, just renting a single floor in an old building that was a bit far from the city center. He had stayed up several nights writing code, and after I brought him food, I forced him to take a break. The break room was small, and he slept on a tiny bed while I sat beside him. I had also been exhausted for a while, preparing to apply to schools abroad. At some point, I must have fallen asleep at the end of the bed. And under the blanket, Claude's arm stirred. When I woke up again, it was already dark. I was lying on that small bed, and when I opened my eyes, Claude was standing by the window, lost in thought. Are you awake? Didn't I set the alarm? What time is it now? I had missed Dan's tutoring session and hurriedly started packing my things. Claude turned and looked at me. It went off once, but I turned it off. I suddenly got angry. What are you doing? Didn't you know I still had tutoring? He froze for a moment, then chuckled. This is the first time I've seen you angry. I closed my eyes, didn't say anything, and just hurriedly picked up the dishes. The next moment, my phone screen lit up, and Claude sent me a number. I paused for a second and raised my voice. What are you doing again? I'm just delaying the time you'll slip out of our control, Claude smiled. And didn't you see? I'm building a business, and our family will soon be wealthy. How much do you still owe the bank? Do you think you're some rich kid? Yeah, I'm not Brandon. Then, he walked towards me. But the money I sent you is what I just earned. I can cover the tutoring session you owe them. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Olivia, Claude said in a low voice, gripping my wrist. I'm not bad, right? We're not suited for each other. I took a deep breath. And besides, we both know it was your mom's involvement that led to my parents' divorce. I know. You don't know. I stared into his eyes. You don't know how I've been living all these years. And besides, you said it yourself, I'm just as proud as you. Claude usually stayed at the office. The company was small, and there were only about 10 people. It was around 7 p.m. when I went downstairs. This area was part of the old district. There weren't many people, and the streets were quiet. That's when I spotted the Range Rover parked by the side of the road. I could see a strong hand, holding a cigarette, not lit but just playing with it, resting on the driver's side window. Sure enough, the car honked the next second. Olivia. Brandon pulled his hand back, got out of the car, and walked towards me. I noticed he was wearing a sandalwood bracelet on his left wrist. He blocked me under the streetlight. Why didn't you answer my calls? His face showed some irritation, and the fine sandalwood bracelet on his wrist reflected the light, looking very expensive, enough to buy a whole office building, far beyond something for a small, worn-down place like this. It became clear to me that some people are born in luxury. Before I could answer, Brandon lowered his head and met my eyes. Olivia, what's going on? You didn't come to your tutoring session today. Sorry, I snapped back to reality. I took a nap and overslept. I gave a shy smile. But Brandon didn't react. In fact, I thought his face darkened when he heard that. How did you find me here? I asked. It's simple. I can track people easily when I want to, he said coolly. Claude is your stepbrother, why did you tell me he was just a friend? You've been investigating me? Sorry, Olivia, I only wanted to check on him. I didn't speak, just took a step back. I should have expected it. Since Brandon was trying to pursue me, how could he not understand my family background? The troubled family and financial situation, along with the fragile pride I carried behind the full scholarship. We didn't speak after that. I allowed Brandon to take me home. I'll make up for the lesson I missed today, I said. No worries. Dan's grades are so bad, missing a class won't matter, he replied. I didn't respond. Brandon said a few more things, and I just gave brief answers. Finally, the car stopped in front of the school gate. I'll take you downstairs, he offered. No need. Olivia, he called after me again. I just want you to be happy, that's all. Today. I was just worried. It's fine. I understand. Brandon. I cut him off before he could say more, looking him straight in the eye. After this semester, I want to quit tutoring. Brandon frowned. Quit? Why? I need to prepare for exams abroad, I took a deep breath. I want to apply to universities overseas. It wasn't until I got back to my dorm that I saw Claude's IG post. No caption, just a picture, me, asleep with my head resting on the bed's edge. Since he was investigating, would he be able to see this photo? Sure enough, I saw that Brandon had liked it. That was his usual style. Thinking back to how he'd come down to the office to find me earlier, I suddenly understood. And I started thinking about the challenge. Has Brandon passed the first test? The following days were quiet. I started avoiding Brandon, and began spending more time at Claude's company. His company was growing, but he was working even harder. After a few more all-nighters, I met someone I'd never seen before. I noticed that the person was from Brandon's family business. Aside from tutoring, I barely saw Brandon. But on the last day of tutoring for the summer, he cornered me in my room. What's been going on with you lately? He frowned, his tone a bit urgent. Why aren't you answering my calls? Didn't you see my texts? I've been really busy, sorry. It was true that I was busy, but I hadn't seen his messages. The test I was giving him had been going on for a month and 3 days. Claude's IG, with more and more of my photos in it. Because Brandon could see it, I just accepted Claude's behavior. You really want to apply to universities abroad? He asked. If you go abroad, it'll be hard to come back. I know. I leaned against the door, watching as Brandon lowered his head and quietly said, it'll be hard to see me again. I know. He was so close, his head lowered, and for the first time, I saw a trace of loneliness in his face. Then he leaned in closer. Olivia, are you really willing to leave me behind? His breath was too close, and I felt a tightness in my throat. No one would ever be unaware of their own flaws. Brandon knew how to use his looks to fool people. Why can't you stay for me? I had nowhere to retreat. Brandon, why don't you say it instead? Go abroad for me. After that, I completely shut down towards Brandon. I didn't answer his calls, didn't reply to his messages, and ignored him altogether. But he got more persistent, waiting outside my door, sending food, and waiting for me after class. Bold and persistent, that was his usual way. Everyone at school knew he had turned over a new leaf, trying so hard to win me over, yet still failing. If we counted from the day his phone photos were exposed, it had been a month already. So if the bet really existed, he had lost. As for my own bet, I still had 2 months. When I went downstairs, I unexpectedly ran into both him and Claude. Olivia. Olivia. They called my name at the same time. Some students were watching, so I stopped. Do you both have something? Claude spoke first. My mom wants you to come home for dinner tonight. Why? Brandon mocked leisurely, bring your mom along, I booked a restaurant. Claude shot him a cold glance. I'm talking to her. And I'm also talking to her. The atmosphere instantly became charged with tension. Right in front of Brandon, I pulled Claude's arm. Let's go. Time to visit home today. Brandon's expression stiffened slightly as he glanced at me. That look held shock, disbelief, and a fleeting sense of hurt. My heart sank, as if a small piece of it had caved in. All right, Claude curved his lips into a smile. Let's head home. Then, as he turned, he leaned down to whisper in my ear, nicely done. Let's see how this bet plays out. I still worked part-time at the cafe during my free time. Hello, what can I get for you? It's my first time here. Any recommendations? Startled, I looked up. It was Brandon. He leaned against the counter, casually tapping the menu with his fingers, his expression teasing. Or maybe, what do you usually like to drink? His hurt and forlorn look from the other day vividly flashed before my eyes. I don't drink coffee, I snapped back to my senses, treating him like any other customer, though my voice involuntarily softened. You could try our signature drink. All right, I'll have one. Make it however you like. With that, Brandon left. He chose a seat in the farthest corner, directly facing the counter. Once seated, he openly watched me. I lowered my head, pretending not to notice, and busied myself making coffee. After preparing the signature drink, I brought it over to him. Brandon was looking at his phone, seemingly unaware of my approach. As I neared, I caught a girl's voice. Sitting across from him, with her back to the counter, was a girl with a sweet, delicate appearance. She was speaking softly to him. Between glances at his phone, Brandon nodded occasionally. Clatter. My hand slipped, and the coffee crashed to the floor. Scalding liquid splashed onto my hand, clothes, and the floor, scattering shards of ceramic everywhere. Olivia. Brandon jumped up abruptly, grabbing my hand. What's wrong with you? I regained composure. Sorry. Seeing that girl had thrown me off for a moment. Brandon pulled me to the restroom and ran cold water over my scalded hand. Be more careful next time. I stayed silent. He spoke again, calm as ever, she's someone my family introduced me to. I'm just humoring them. Still, I said nothing. In the mirror, the man's sharp features were focused, his brow furrowed slightly as he carefully tended to the red marks on my hand. Olivia. Do you really need to doubt that I only like you? Quit being slick, I retorted stiffly, keeping my tone hard. Brandon chuckled, his laugh light and clear. All right, I'll admit it. I brought her here on purpose. Though it resulted in you getting hurt, he leaned in slightly, his breath close. Olivia, you see, your reaction just now doesn't lie. His presence pressed in suddenly, carrying that familiar cool scent of his. As he turned off the tap, I stepped back, hitting my waist against the counter. You. Before I could finish, his lips were on mine. Moments later, Brandon released me. His fingertips traced down from my dazed, flushed eyes to my burning ears. Sorry, Olivia. You're absolutely adorable. Only 3 days remained until the end of the 4-month bet. Brandon's persistence never wavered, making sure everyone knew he was serious about me. That day had been my first kiss. I tried avoiding him, but he would grin cheekily and keep trying to win me over. Olivia, I lost. Brandon constantly brought up that kiss. I couldn't hold back. Also, I like you. When will you say yes? I would turn my head away, ignoring him, and tell him to shut up. His unrestrained joy was impossible to hide. Even when I went to deliver food to Claude, Brandon would spot the distinctive Range Rover parked downstairs and couldn't resist throwing in a sarcastic jab. As expected of someone destined for greatness, you even deliver food to your rival. I ignored him. Eat up and rest well. Your mom keeps asking about you. Why doesn't she ask me directly? I shot him a stop the nonsense look. My stepmother's attempt to pair me with Claude had never faded. Thinking of the bet's looming deadline, I said to him, if I win, tell her you're going on a blind date. Claude paused mid-bite, his chopsticks hovering. That confident, huh? 3 days left. Olivia, you never make bold claims unless you're 100% sure. I stayed silent and rolled my eyes at him. Maybe, for now, I was pushing down the doubts deep in my heart and choosing to trust him temporarily. Are you still planning to go abroad? Claude asked. Brandon's voice echoed in my mind, Olivia, stay for me. After a pause, I shook my head. Yes, I said lightly. It's been planned for a long time. Claude gave a self-deprecating smile. Olivia, you really haven't changed at all. No one can sway you. Cold and utterly selfish. I looked down, my tone calm. Then this selfish person wishes you a lifetime of dealing with homewreckers. Tomorrow was the final day of the bet. I picked up a custom perfume I had made, blending sea breeze, citrus, and faint cool notes. It reminded me of that day by the seaside villa, the warmth of a rabbit-shaped keychain pressed into my palm. It was meant as a return gift. I planned to give it to him tomorrow. For the first time, just imagining confessing to him made my breath quicken. I told myself to relax, but my heart couldn't help but anticipate it. That evening, I returned home and placed the perfume bag on the table. The phone rang, it was an unfamiliar number. This is Maria, Brandon's sister. Video file. Brandon's birthday is tomorrow. Tonight, we threw an early celebration. I'll send you the room number. How should I describe the scene back then? The door to the private room was heavy and soundproof. Even so, the music wasn't loud. The deafening noise came from a group of people enthusiastically counting down. 56, 57, 58. Damn, Brandon. He said we'd go big tonight, and he meant it. Come on, next round. We've got to get him to spin for 3 minutes this time. Amid the flashing lights, I saw a girl in a short skirt climb off Brandon. She was slightly out of breath, one hand still resting on his shoulder. Impressive. And the person who had just told me he liked me and wanted to be with me didn't even move the hand resting on her waist. Brandon leaned lazily against the sofa, a faint smirk of arrogance tugging at his lips, his posture utterly debauched. There were about 20 people in the room, the same group of tight-lipped buddies he had introduced me to during our first gathering. So much for tight-lipped. Who noticed me first? It certainly wasn't Brandon. Olivia. Damn. Brandon shoved the girl aside and stood up abruptly, staring at me in panic. It was the first time I'd ever seen him so flustered. His friends, loyal as ever, jumped in before he could. Don't get the wrong idea. It's just a game. Brandon lost, and we made him do it. The music stopped, and the door clicked shut behind me. To my surprise, I felt oddly calm, eerily calm, even. It was as if this exact scenario, though unfamiliar in reality, had played out in my head 100 times before. You made him do it? I smiled faintly. Come on. Last time, he snapped his fingers, and you all immediately toned it down. And now he's suddenly at your mercy? People are people. Dogs are still dogs. Olivia. Brandon couldn't sit still any longer. He rushed toward me in a few strides. Listen, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It's just a game. A game? What kind of game? I tilted my head slightly, the mockery in my smile deepening. A game where you blow off steam before winning me over tomorrow? Working overtime to indulge yourself for one last night? Brandon froze, speechless. He was probably wondering how I knew. I turned away, unwilling to say more. But he grabbed my wrist. Olivia. Shut up. I instinctively shook him off, as though his touch was something filthy. Brandon, we're not even together yet. And even if we were, I already know, you'll never change. The next second, I grabbed a bottle of wine from the nearby table and splashed it directly in his face. The timeline rewound to when I first got home and clicked on the video. Amid the chaos in the recording, I heard cheers and Brandon's voice at the center of it all. 3 girls were seated beside him. One of them was Lisa. So, that's why Brandon hasn't made a move after 4 months, someone said. Had it all under control from the start, huh? TSK, 4 months. Olivia's really hard to crack. Would he even care about her if her brother wasn't so easy to bribe? Without that info, she'd just be another nobody, right? Brandon chuckled. What nonsense. I've liked her for 3 years. If I didn't put in some effort, how else would I make her fall for me completely? Ha ha ha, exactly. Even the untouchable flower isn't untouchable after all. She must be hard to please. Brandon smiled again. That's why I set up tonight's party. One last game, and after this, I'm done. She's the one. Wow, really? The player's finally turning over a new leaf? Turn over a new leaf, and it's gold. Olivia's getting the bargain of a lifetime. The crowd kept bantering, and Brandon spun a bottle. It stopped on Lisa. Pick a card, sweetheart. Tonight might just make your dream come true. What's the point of cards? Lisa laughed, her grin widening. How about a 2-minute kiss? Let's see your skills. Brandon didn't hesitate. Sure. The video cut off there. My trembling fingers hovered over the screen for a long time before I managed to type out a reply, thank you. Maria replied almost instantly, you should go. Maria was Brandon's sister, fresh back from a graduation trip after her college entrance exams. I'd met her once before. It was in Brandon's room, where she was rummaging through something. The delicate-faced girl had given me one indifferent glance, her expression completely flat. Now, I understood. If Brandon's room often saw a revolving door of women, of course, she was used to it. I blocked all of Brandon's contacts. When he tried cornering me at the classroom door, I coldly took out the water bottle I'd prepared and splashed it over him in front of everyone. Keep going. Brandon even grabbed a water bottle from a classmate and handed it to me. Olivia, keep splashing until you're satisfied. I tossed the bottle back at him. No thanks. Just move aside. Olivia, I was wrong. I was a jerk. He refused to budge, blocking my way. Give me another chance. Yell at me, hit me, anything. Just forgive me. Brandon, if any of that worked, would you still be like this? Did the girls you dumped never cry their hearts out like you are now? I sneered. And by the way, you knew about the bet. You knew I was going to confess to you and start dating you tomorrow. Oh, wait. I forgot, guys like you can never get enough. No, Olivia, I really. Enough. I was tired. Done talking. Brandon, don't come looking for me anymore. This is goodbye. To avoid Brandon, I stopped going to school altogether. With graduation approaching and my credits completed, I was busy with paperwork for studying abroad. Damn. Claude spat out his first bite of food. Did you forget to add salt? I didn't even glance at him. None of your business. He clicked his tongue but kept eating. When did you get mixed up with him? The day I picked you up from school. How much did he offer? More than a bank loan. Tisk, I scoffed. Figures. But, Claude said, his voice casual, he's still asking me about you. What does that have to do with me? After dinner, while Claude cleaned the dishes, I stood by the window, spacing out. That Range Rover was parked downstairs again. Claude. I turned to him. Take me down. He paused, startled. Okay. So when I walked out arm in arm with Claude, I saw Brandon's stunned expression from the driver's seat. Olivia, he got out and rushed over in a few steps, blocking my way. I need to talk to you. You've only got a few lines, anyway. I stared at him coldly and tightened my grip on Claude's arm. I told you, we're done. You too. Brandon's gaze darted to our linked arms. Didn't he tell you what happens if I lose the bet? I chuckled, my smile devoid of warmth. If I lost, I'd have to marry him. I saw Brandon's face crumble again, disbelief etched into every feature as he turned to glare at Claude. Claude averted his eyes, his expression indifferent. Predictably. My smile grew wider. Brandon, isn't this your masterpiece? Why the long face? Olivia. Enough, Claude said, pulling my hand securely into his. We're heading home. Please excuse us. As soon as we got into the car, I dropped my act and yanked my hand away. Switching faces so fast? I ignored him. Your mom's bugging me to bring you home again, I said blankly. It's annoying. Didn't you lose the bet? Claude leaned back lazily, his eyes narrowing. You lost. You said it yourself, you have to marry me. In your dreams. I slumped against the seat and closed my eyes. You never liked me. You confessed on a whim, used me to get Brandon's help starting your business, and now you want a free wedding? Keep dreaming. Wow. Claude laughed. Why don't you believe me? What if, just what if, I really like you a little? News of what happened between Brandon and me got leaked anonymously. The bet, the absurd last indulgence, and his relentless pestering were all exposed. His so-called repentance was nothing more than finding someone to clean up his mess. The post even came with commentary. A man without self-respect is like rotten cabbage. A woman without self-worth becomes stale flowers. What is there to like about Brandon besides his looks? I didn't know how Brandon was faring and had no time to care. I took on several more translation jobs, working day and night non-stop. My documents were ready. I was set to leave. But life, as always, had its own plans. My father, who rarely came home, got into trouble. A car accident, the surgery is about to begin, and the doctor said the situation isn't very optimistic. When I arrived, my father had just been pushed into the operating room. My stepmother was crying by the side, and Claude stood nearby, updating me on the situation. To be honest, I accepted the situation quite quickly. After all, my mother had been sick when he married my stepmother. And when he knew she wouldn't live much longer, he forced her to divorce him. Have you booked your flight? Claude pulled me aside. Your father's condition isn't good. After this surgery, it's already booked. I replied, and he just stared at me in silence. Olivia, no matter what, he is your father. So what? The atmosphere froze again. It started to rain outside the window, a scene of wet and muddy streets. I'll go get breakfast for you guys. I said. Olivia, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I won't let him get away with it. You two can't get married. If you agree to marry him, I'll stop the wedding. A strange number, familiar person, calling from just a few hours ago. I looked down at the screen and smiled. What era is this? Late confessions are more pathetic than cheap grass, don't you get it? A spoiled young master, born with a silver spoon, really has a simple mind. I blocked the number, put my phone away, and walked down the hallway. Claude, don't push your luck. As I passed the fire exit, I heard voices inside. It was Brandon. He was confronting Claude. Young master, don't forget, Olivia and I are family, the latter's voice was clear, accompanied by a sarcastic laugh. And about the bet, I've told you everything, including her thoughts. It's obvious who's going to fail. No need for me to explain further, right? Brandon didn't respond. What a mess you've made of a good hand, Claude mocked again. Let her go, I'll agree to anything, Brandon spoke up. Don't force her into marriage. The Brandon family will be your support in the future. Sounds like a good deal. But what if I really like her? If I didn't know Claude's character, I might have fallen for that line. He's a born businessman, always putting profit first. I can offer you more. Olivia won't forgive me, I know, but I'll wait for her to come back. Don't wait so long that you end up in another girl's room. I lifted my foot and didn't listen any further. Brandon didn't appear at the hospital. To be more precise, he didn't appear in front of me again once he knew I was at the hospital. But the next day, my father was moved to the VIP ward, and the team of experts came in. It didn't take long before we were told he was out of danger. Who did it? It's obvious. Olivia. I turned around, and Claude walked over to me. He stood beside me. How soon is your flight, the day after tomorrow? 3 in the afternoon. It started to rain again outside, and neither of us spoke, we just stood in silence. Suddenly, something thin was pressed into my palm, and I froze. It was a bank card. Everything's expensive abroad, Claude said. Take it, or life abroad will be hard. I don't need it. It's from your father. I was stunned. Claude continued, your father didn't want my mom to know, so he gave it to me. He also gave me another card for a startup fund. The fool really thought your dad didn't make money outside. He just didn't want my mom to know. What about you? I don't want her to know either. I turned to look at him, but I couldn't think of anything to say. Take it, he said. I didn't use the money your father left for you. He said he owed you and your mom, and it has to stay with you. The weather cleared today. The airport was busy with people coming and going, and the announcements never stopped. I pulled my suitcase, walking while checking my flight information. It was almost time to board. I didn't inform anyone, nor did I have anyone send me off. My father was still unconscious, and I hadn't even seen him. Hey, miss, you dropped something. Someone tapped me, and I looked down to see a familiar item on the ground, a new, uniquely shaped handmade rabbit keychain. I picked it up and stared at it for 3 seconds. Thank you. After the person left, I turned around and threw it in the trash can. It wasn't my rabbit. It never was from the start, and it never will be. Then I dragged my suitcase, passed through security, and joined the line to board. There were so many people, coming and going, but no one stopped. But after taking a few steps, for some reason, I stopped and looked back. I locked eyes with that distant, burning gaze. It was Brandon. He stood outside security, hands in his pockets, and I didn't know how long he had been watching me. His eyes lacked their usual brilliance. The broadcast began urging passengers again. Someone brushed past me, their bag bumping into mine, leaving a light apology and a fleeting pain. I suddenly understood the meaning of a passerby. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I pulled my gaze away, turned, and walked off without looking back. Outside, the sky was clear, as if the salty sea breeze from across the ocean had been carried by the wings of the plane. But it was new. And I would be new too. Brandon, goodbye. The end.